So I'm your host, Brien Gearin, with you today. And on this edition of the MU Pod, I'm joined by David Sidoni. He is the founder of How to Buy a Home. He's an accomplished real estate agent in Southern California turned first-time homebuyer educator. He is the Dave Ramsey of first-time homebuyers. David, I'm going to give you a second here to do your origin story. But first, man, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here. Although my son loves Monsters University, so I thought that's where I was. So good to know.
Close. Millionaire University, Monsters University. Yeah, become a monster millionaire. How about that?
I love that. Excellent.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah. All right. Well, David, we're gonna talk a lot today about your business, how you got into it. I know before we hit record, we were talking a little bit about just the massive hole in the market, if you will, and the lack of support for first-time home buyers, and even just the incredibly tough road they have. And as a first-time home buyer about 8 years ago, I remember what that was like, and it was not easy because you're just getting slung a bunch of just crap that you know nothing about. And even if you did some education online, maybe you read up on some NerdWallet, articles or something, that's great. But until you just walk it and live it, it's tough to know how it goes. But I've checked out some of your stuff, and man, it looks like you are the top-notch guy to go to when it comes to buying a home. But also we want to talk about your business too, and how you went from more of a traditional real estate agent to doing your own thing to now you've got a national network of first-time home buying agents. It sounds awesome. So we're going to get into that in just a second. But first, let's talk about your origin story. Give me a better introduction of yourself than I did, and let's hear kind of how you got to where you are today.
It's the story is all about following your passion. And it originated in my 20s when I quit my athletic career to follow singing and dancing, which was a really fun conversation with my dad when I was a senior in high school. And I ended up doing showbiz for 20 years, worked with, Gene Kelly was a advisor on a movie I did with Christian Bale.
Whoa.
And
All right.
and then got to work with Michael Jackson, and then was on TV shows. And then I hosted my own TV shows. And then one day I woke up and realized that my passion was going to be raising a family. And in showbiz, you're either the top 1% having people send you scripts, or you're hustling all day long. And I didn't feel like hustling because I wanted to be there for my kids. So followed the passion and realized that I needed to get a different career that was going to sustain that. Started in real estate investing, thought that was going to be it. Found no passion there. Spreadsheets are not my friend. So I went into residential real estate. And I did that for about 12 years, 13 years, had a great time at it. Wasn't necessarily, the same passion as pursuing my career as a performer. And I'm by Disneyland. And so I have a lot of first-time buyers because I got into residential real estate when the market crashed. And as a realtor, the way to do it correctly is to be your own business CEO. Even though you're working for a broker, or even though you're someplace else, you have to develop the systems and the follow-up and the client database and have everything and work it as a CEO as opposed to, an employee of the broker. And as I was getting into the minutia of that, my wife looked at me and said, "You're only happy when you work with those Disneyland people, the people who help buy their first homes." Well, at the time, I'd also learned enough about the industry to realize that the consumers were being treated, well, let's say ridiculously poorly, pathetically, turned and burned, thrown into a numbers game so the brokers could make money. And so I started studying entrepreneurship a little bit even more and realizing that there was an opportunity to offer a customer service level to these people that you could systematize and help these people that were being ignored by the industry, because the first-time home buyers are the lowest money that the people are going to make in it, and the realtors look at them as the lowest return on the investment, and kind of snub their nose to them. And then started a few different projects, and fast forward to today, and the podcast has 1.7 something million downloads, and we help tens of thousands of people a year get through the process. And that's how I ended up where I am.
Wow. Okay. And we're all about abundance. What's the name of your podcast?
How to Buy a Home.
How to Buy a Home. There you go. That was easy. How to Buy a Home podcast. Make sure you guys check that out after our episode here, of course. All right, David, man, that's a heck of a story. So when you first noticed that there was this neglected portion of the market, for you, was it kind of one of those moments where it's like, Man, these folks they're totally neglected. They're just looked at as, a low end number. They're not given the service that they deserve. Was that just like light bulb moment where it's like there's a ton of these people, and even though they might be buying the lesser expensive homes, or the payout is less, what was it for you? Was it more of like I just sincerely want to go help these folks, but also, you're running a business, you need to be profitable too. Was there a mix of that in there where you're like there's plenty of these people to go help and they're all being neglected? Was that the light bulb?
So the feeling of the people being neglected was always there. And I was using it as this is a part of my business. Everyone told me, though, you need to list a lot of homes to and help people sell homes in order to make money in the industry. And I thought, okay, I'm going to do that, but I'm going to have this leg that serves the underserved. And then from the business perspective, as I got higher and higher in the real estate game and you went to the conferences and you talked to people at a higher level, suddenly you understand the scale of real estate. There are only so many hours in the day. There are only so many homes you can show. It doesn't matter if you're the greatest listing agent or buyer's agent in the area. You can only go into 4 or 5 living rooms, and or 1 or 2 a night maybe, and on the weekend you can only take out so many buyers. So the scale of the business was where I really started to see how I could make a difference in a bigger way. If you can figure out a way to scale a real estate team, one person can sell 50 homes without pulling their hair out. Now you get further than that, you have to have an admin support staff, and then you also have to have a complete staff that maybe is doing almost everything top to bottom. You see the real estate mega teams that have like 20 people on there and they sell 500 homes a year, but people don't understand that there's a scale in the creation of your business model. Kind of like a personal trainer. What do you do if you're a personal trainer? You either start buying gyms or you start charging $500 an hour because you only have so many hours a day you can do it. So when suddenly I realized that I could give these people the level of service that they deserve, then I had to figure out a way to scale it because the hole was so glaring that, there at one point in the last year or so, there were 3 million people with a real estate license and only 1 million homes for sale. So it's quite obvious that this is a ridiculously saturated market. Most of these people should not be doing their job. 87% of real estate agents quit before their 5th year, and 47% of real estate agents didn't sell 1 home last year. So that sucks for the first-time home buyer. So I approached it from a place of protection, but I also approached it from a place of there could be a gigantic group of consumers that I could help. And if you bring quality service, the industry is showing me they're throwing them crap service. So by scaling a way to give people high level service, there was a business opportunity.
Okay, so we got the genesis there. Let's talk about that business opportunity. Were you at a brokerage where you were realizing this and you're just like, I got to get out of here. I got to do my own thing. Did you always want to be that entrepreneur? And then when you recognize that, what was like the first year like? Were you scrapping by, or you walk me down that road?
Well, I have kind of the entrepreneur journey that most people do. In 2018, my wife told me that, and I got 3 big fat notebooks from Staples, and I started writing, started going through business plans, started going through concepts and ideas. In 2009, the end of 2018, I launched a more intensive social media campaign with the idea that I was going to grow a bigger group of first-time home buyers within Southern California that I could serve. And in 2019, I quit my broker and I went to an online broker that wasn't the whole bricks and mortar thing. And I started the podcast. And as that started to grow, I took the entrepreneurial ideas that I had that most real estate agents need to follow in order to be successful. And I kind of flipped it on its ear and I said, what can I do? And it was the education first that led to, okay, let's just jab, and then maybe give them a right hook if they want it, but mostly just educate. And the original concept was I was going to do that to grow something big in Southern California. And then, like all good entrepreneurs, I had to pivot. But to answer your question, what did I do? The first year, I sold as many homes as I could. And that was 8 hours a day. And then I worked till 2 o'clock in the morning every night. Like most entrepreneurs, I didn't necessarily have, $100,000 in the bank to be my salary for that year. So I had to double duty, and it was a lot of long hours, and it ended up being something that was worth it for me.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about how, so you get through that first year, and yeah, I love the point that at least I took it this way. It's like, I just had to get out and sell, right? I just had to do the one thing that makes me the money while building the kind of the more of from your heart and helping these cohort of buyers, right? The first time home buyers. And I think I really want to stress that, because there's so many entrepreneurs out there, or soon to be entrepreneurs, who want to do this thing, especially if it's something that's coming from the heart, or maybe it's launching a nonprofit or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
But it takes time. And often it takes a lot of time. We're kind of blinded by stories of, oh, look at this tech whiz, they just launched a SaaS product and now they're deca millionaires. And it's like, well, hold on, maybe it's not all like that, right? Or maybe you don't see the 10 years of preparation they put into that, right?
Absolutely. Coming from the world of show business, it's something you see every single day. It's, the 10-year overnight success.
Right. Exactly. All right. So talking about the growth of your business, and we can kind of zoom out. And I know at the intro, we mentioned how right now you have kind of you ended up building out a nationwide network. You called it a happy accident, where a nationwide network of vetted first-time home buying agents are part of what you offer now. What was that like when you kind of realized that, this is a part of the business where I can really extend that customer service arm? Even if somebody's hearing my podcast and they live in Ohio, I'm in California. Well, shoot, I've got to find a way to help this person. What was kind of the nexus that led you to being like, there's something here where I can extend my help to the next level?
It started because within real estate, we already have that built in. When you serve a certain area, I serve Southern California. There's been a mass exodus from where I live. People hate the taxes. People hate the mortgage. People realize they can get a mansion in nice places like Dallas, Texas for half the price. And no state income tax. So you have a referral network that you build. So as I built it, and then I started using my podcast, which I thought was going to be educating and empowering the people in Southern California. Oops, podcasts go everywhere. So suddenly people started calling me, say, who do you have in Denver? Who do you have in Seattle? Who do you have in Florida? And they weren't saying that. They were saying, who's like you in that area? And the interesting thing is I have a very professional, there are other companies that will refer people, and that's the way the companies make their business. They're always pay to play. The people that are on the preferred list, including Zillow, everybody, those people on Zillow paid to be there, doesn't mean they're the best people. In fact, most of the time, it sure as hell isn't. So one day during the podcast, I was talking about, like, look, it's not rocket science. You just go and interview in your town. I happen to know, because I go to real estate conferences with these people and have for, over a decade now. I just happen to know a lot of these people. And I was watching Sports Center, and they were talking about some freak of nature, a crazy athlete, and they called him a unicorn. So in an incredibly professional business decision, I accidentally called them unicorns because I had just watched someone say it on Sports Center about some defensive lineman who could run a 4.2 40. And next thing you know, now my little network is called the Unicorn Network, because they really are magical, because they're experienced agents who give a damn and will show empathy with the planning process. And so by elevating the level of the referral-based system through my cheesy terminology of a unicorn, now that's the business structure that I have in place.
Gotcha. Okay. Very cool. Very cool. I think, and maybe even some of our listeners out there might be in the real estate game, and this is a pathway that they could be a part of as well. If they're looking to grow their business, it's one thing to be an agent, have your license, and sell some homes, but correct me if I'm wrong, but if you can find a niche within your niche, then you can really drill down and become the specialist in something and really be that go-to person for that thing. And, the rest could be history.
I think the one of the things that I see as, now becoming this serial entrepreneur, because within this single endeavor, the first one was being a real estate agent. The second one was trying to get this thing off the ground. The thing that I see people do far too often is attempt to be too many things to too many people. And what really solidified for me the comfort level of drilling down my niche was the recognition of the level of service that they were getting and the unique selling proposition that I could offer that would be different. Once I saw that, if I drill this far down, there's still 1.3 to 1.8 million first-time home buyers every year. So if you take your entrepreneurship and you go too broad, especially if you're doing social media, where community is everything. Community talks when they feel they're a part of something. And you only feel a part of something the deeper that you drill down.
Right. Absolutely. You mentioned a lot of times now customer service. And, when we think of customer service and we think of portions of a buying public that are ignored, you think of a massive lack of customer service.
Correct.
What was it for you that you thought, despite, first-time home buyers being fairly neglected, what did you do differently to provide them a level of service? Was it purely the education of it, or was there something different, some sort of surprise and delight that you would present to a first-time home buyer that the average agent definitely wouldn't do?
So the first thing was when I started and founded the company, How to Buy a Home, I didn't have the data. It was just all in my mind. And what was in my mind was 13 years of helping people, a lot of them being first-time home buyers. Every single one of them, when I handed them the keys, said to me, "Damn, Sidoni, I should have done this a year ago, maybe 2. I wasted a year's worth of rent, maybe 2." So once they went through the process, I saw a giant hole in the industry. The industry sink or swim with the agents, not the buyers. The industry tells an agent, "Congratulations, you got it. Go out there and help somebody." And then they become on-the-job training for the people. And that sucks for the client that you're on-the-job training for somebody for the largest financial transaction of your life. So
Yeah.
I saw that was the hole in customer service. And then through the fact that I kept hearing, gosh, we should have done this sooner, that's when I realized that the planning, helping them, basically telling people, call me way before you think it's cool to call me. And now I have the data. 5 years of doing the podcast and the YouTube channel and everything else that we're doing, 72% of the people over all 5 years that tell me they're 12 to 18 months out are under contract in 3.2 months. So that tells me there's still a giant hole and I need a bigger microphone to explain to people the way to do this right is to start planning way earlier than you think you should. Because the people who reach out to me who get under a contract in 3.2 months when they thought they were a year and a half away, they could have saved a year's rent and done it a year's earlier. And the service level that they would have gotten when someone's talking to them a year out, it's like going from LA to New York without a GPS. That's the customer service level. You can get in the car and follow the freeway signs that say east and you'll end up in New York. Most people do all the research themselves and they call me when they're in Jersey and then they're ready to go to New York. I tell people, I'm getting in the car with you in LA. Once a month, I'm going to check in. How's the credit score? How's the debt? How's the savings? Ooh, have you looked into a mortgage interest rate buy down? Have you considered the fact that maybe there are some down payment assistance programs? Have you looked into, are you a veteran? All those things, the planning, I'm not saying once you fill this out and we figure that out, we're buying a home this weekend. No. Let's start the plan but how did I create that business model where it wasn't a waste of the time to the professionals that I was referring to people? And then it was creating a system within what I do. And that system was my dumb ass staying up till 2 o'clock in the morning and recording my podcast. And that was me sitting in a dark room by myself. I give the education to the people and they use it on their time. And that's where we're at.
I love it. I love it because it's also not, it's a non-intrusive way to educate. Obviously, like it's a podcast, you elect to listen to a podcast, but it's in such an area that there's such a lack of knowledge that, man, and based on how long you've been running your podcast and how many listeners you have, you've helped a ton of people. So that's really cool to see. So I know if I were listening to this episode, I would definitely have some questions about real estate in general right now, and maybe also as it pertains to being an entrepreneur. We have a lot of listeners and viewers who are early stage entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs. Also, I'm making a guess, but I'm sure a lot of people might be in the market for their first home. And I know as an entrepreneur, when I was buying my first home was right after I kind of went out on my own as an entrepreneur. Horrible timing, but you just do things when you do things, right?
Yep.
Buying a home as a self-employed person, it can be very different. And it's something that I learned a lot about through trial and error when we were first trying to get our second house right during COVID, which was a disaster. However, what is it in, kind of give us your high-level overview of the real estate market. I know it totally varies across the country, but
Sure.
Everybody's main freak out is interest rates right now. What would you say to people who are maybe in the first time home buying market and they're like, I can't even look right now, like the interest rates are too high?
Again, back to the sports metaphor. Your Monday morning quarterbacking. You're thinking just about what happened on Sunday. If you're only looking at the last 5 years of real estate, you are pining and whining about the 3% interest rates that happened. It's never going to happen again.
Mm-hmm.
If you study, I'm a self-proclaimed real estate nerd. The best way to do well in the stock market is to understand, yes, potential crazy future things that could happen, but mostly to understand the history. And the history of real estate is that we are now settling into a new normal. Here's the big difference. There is the largest lack of inventory that we've ever had. And that is because in 2008, 9, 10, 11, and 12, those were the only 5 years that we have ever built less than 1 million homes. And some of those years we built, 400, 500, 600,000 homes. Hundreds of thousands of homes didn't get built. Current data, depending on who you listen to, is anywhere from, 3 to 6 to 7 million homes short. Therefore, as we go into our next level of what we're doing with buying a home, the inventory is going to affect supply and demand, and prices will continue to appreciate because we don't have enough homes for sale. Now, getting back to what you were talking about in the questions you asked, self-employed, more than a W-2 person, an entrepreneur, a 1099er, or a soon-to-be 1099er or a self-employed individual, I tell everyone they should call a professional a year earlier. They should call 2 years earlier. In my almost 2 decades of doing this, I can't tell you how many entrepreneurs we had to go back and redo last year's taxes and have them pay more on their taxes because they wrote everything off as a self-employed individual attempting to get their business off the ground. But then, so you made $200,000, but you told the IRS you made 75 because you wrote off everything you ever did. Well, that means you're only showing the bank to buy a home that you made $75,000. So that process, and you may go through the process with someone and figure out that it doesn't make sense for you. You need all that cash up front right now to get the business off the ground. And if that's the case, cool. As long as you have run the numbers of renting for a year or two while you're feeding your capital into the business versus renting for 2 or 3 years when maybe you could have purchased for a lower capital investment, a 3% down payment, 3.5% FHA loan down payment. And then instead of paying $2,000, $3,000 a month, $24,000, $36,000 a year to nothing, now maybe instead of putting 100% of your capital into your entrepreneur deal, company, whatever you're trying to do, you put 75% into that. You take the other 75% or other 25%, do a low down payment. And then in 5 years, when your company needs capital, which it will, now you'll have this growing, appreciating asset where you can pull money from that. Not to mention, for the last 5 years, your largest monthly personal bill is fixed. Ask anyone who's renting. If you're renting and trying to be an entrepreneur, you know what bites into your next year's P&L? When your rent goes up $400 a month. So it's not for everybody. I could nerd out on this for hours with you on the numbers. And I agree. I listen to Gary Vaynerchuk, and he's like, rent. Why are you going to put $20,000 down on a house? Put $20,000 into your business. Now, I understand that, because like the example he gives is, if you're making $75,000 a year, why don't you make $75,000 a year selling your jam? Because you love making jam. If you need startup money, I get it. But if it's a long-term plan, you have to look at the math of renting versus owning and creating an asset that you can pull from to continue to fund whatever it is you're creating.
Yeah, and obviously this all, it very much depends on your business, your income, if you're married or not, if you're what area you live in. Like obviously Southern California a little bit different than Ohio or Florida or Texas. So a lot of different variables here, but I love that advice, especially for first-time buyers. It's really just a giant math equation, right? If you can hammer out the numbers and make them fit, or have them fit the way you want, or even if they don't, now you can kind of see like, okay, here's where I want to be, and then reverse engineer it. Here's what I need to do to get to that point, right? And that's why I imagine that's why you say, call me a year in advance or 2 years in advance so we can help you map this out.
Absolutely. And what's funny is what you said in response before you said the math equation part is actually a larger part of the picture. That's the personal part. What if you're married? And what are your individual budgeting goals? And what are your own budgeting styles? Are you aggressive or are you conservative? That's going to change the way that I develop any program for anybody. It depends on what you want to do. Now, I'm still going to show you the math that renting for 10 years while you're all aggressive is probably not going to make sense for you, because your rent's going to continue to go up. You get tax benefits as a homeowner. You can have a fixed something, and you can have an appreciating asset. But the idea that there's the big math equation, it's definitely part of it, but you also have to take into account your personal goals. We'll talk to people who are so excited about this process, and they're doing a forever home, first time purchase. And then suddenly we realize it's going to take them 5 years to save up the down payment for the forever home. So maybe we start with a lateral move. You're in a 2-bedroom apartment. Let's get a 2-bedroom condo and shoot straight across. But when it comes to the math, the biggest mistake that millennials and Gen Z make is looking at one variable in an equation that has 600. And that one variable is my rent's 2,200. A mortgage for something I want to buy is 3,200. It's $1,000 more expensive. So right now, rent versus buy, rent wins. That is such unfortunately short-sighted thinking. And that's why I was in my studio at 2:00 in the morning trying to explain to people how in the long run, the singular one formula of, is it cheaper for that one payment, is just the tip of the iceberg.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. I feel like it kind of boils down to, you don't know what you don't know. So again, another shout out, make sure you go check out David's podcast, because it is loaded with tips and tricks like this. But zooming back out, so, kind of, I'm interested in, you just mentioned kind of the number one thing that really throws a first-time buyer, maybe prevents them from even putting too much thought into it, is the difference between a renting payment and an owning payment. But what are some of the things that you noticed, you currently notice or have noticed throughout the years with a first-time home buyer, where they're making missteps, or they're doing things just out of ignorance? They don't know any better. Do you have like a top 2 or 3 of those things that really stick out to you that we could hopefully put a squash on for those of us who might be in that market?
Yeah, we have a saying on the podcast. It was early on, kind of like the unicorn thing. It just slipped out of my mouth one day. Ignorance has a negative connotation in our society, and it absolutely should not. You don't know what you don't know. True. The definition of ignorance means I just don't know. Now, how you act is where it gets the negative connotation. So I read something like 38% of first-time homebuyers still think you need 20% down to buy a home. That's the first myth that we have to quash. The second thing is that student loan debt is going to hold you back from buying a home. And that's one of the huge ones that the people on social media love to complain about and say, boomer, you bought a house for $50,000, but you didn't have $300,000 in student loans. I get it, but we have to play the cards that were dealt. I have interviews on my podcast of people that found me and found the right unicorn person, and doctors that bought with $300,000 worth of student loans, and engineers that bought with $175,000 worth of student loans. It's the understanding that your debt is not a gross number. Your debt is a monthly number. That's a huge thing that people don't understand. When you're calculating a debt to income ratio, you take your income and then you take the minimum payments on everything. And that's what they're going to tell you how much left over is you can buy a home. And then beyond that, I think that the biggest problem, it's like, you don't need 20% down. You can use zero down. That's facts. But the biggest problem that people have is when they reach out to get a mortgage approval, they get a green light or a red light, and then they stop. It absolutely shouldn't be that. The mortgage person should take all your information, include all that personal stuff, and give you a starting line, and then you pick a time when you're going to get there.
I love it. Now, you mentioned lenders and banks. And I'm going to speak from personal experience here. When I first bought my house, I went through the bank, got a loan. It was a fairly painless process. As I became self-employed and as we started getting back in the market, once we started having more kids and needing a bigger house and COVID happened, it was a whole, the market exploded. It was insane.
Yes.
But I learned a lot about being self-employed and then finding the right type of lender to work with. We had an opportunity to build a house here. We almost were able to take it, fell a little bit short, but we did lending through, or we were working with a mortgage officer through a bank, and me being self-employed and me being, again, ignorant and not knowing, they did not care anything of the assets. They're like, I paid myself more than the government knew, right? Like, obviously following the rules of taxes and all that, but but it affected us, and it prevented us from getting approved for what I knew we could have. But then I learned that there's lenders out there who are far more willing, or maybe they're independent lenders who are far more willing to, like, oh, okay, we see you W-2'd yourself this much. You also dividend yourself this much. Yeah, you can do this. Like, what do you mean? Well, of course they said no, because it was the bank. So what's your opinion on, or your advice on finding a lender and going through banks or going through independent mortgage brokers or et cetera?
All right, I'll give you the overall opinion first, and then I'll give you the facts behind it. The overall opinion first is, when you're buying a home, there are two professionals that are the hub of the transaction, your realtor and your lender. Far too many entrepreneurs, because they're in that mindset, end up thinking, I'm just going to go to the lender first. I'm going to get pre-approved before I even bother a realtor. I understand why they do that. It's not your fault. The lenders and the online lenders, they got to the internet before we did back in 98, 99. They crushed realtors. The number one biggest mistake that is online, that is an absolute lie, is don't call anybody. The first thing you have to do before you even think about getting a house is get a pre-approval. And it's all over the internet. And I'm the only idiot with a microphone saying don't. You want to create your team right away. Find your local real estate agent first. Spend 10 times more time, research, and energy than you do on 10 times more time, research, and energy interviewing and finding the right real estate agent first than you do researching loan products and who's going to give you the best rate. Now, I say that knowing 99% of the people are going to do it the other way. Once you get that, the best way to find a realtor is then go to your realtor and say, what's the best way for me to get a lender? Give me your 3 lenders. One thing I can guarantee you, most of them will not give you a bank or a credit union. A bank or a credit union is for A paper people. So that's the best way to do it, is go through, create a team. You want 2 advocates working together for you who have done this before, not an individual person doing the numbers and an individual person doing the real estate side. You want someone who's done this together and who has worked with first-time home buyers, who has worked with entrepreneurs before. You create that team. Now you have a tag team, and they need to do fantastic jobs for each other, because their businesses grow when they do well together and their clients are happy. Unlike the online lender or your bank, who they got you because of a Super Bowl commercial. They don't care. So, and then nitty gritty, banks and credit unions are for A+ paper people who have tons of money in the bank. They only have 3 or 4 loan products they offer because they're safe. And the credit union and the bank will not offer or work with someone like all of the stuff that you were talking about for yourself. So once you find your realtor, and then you have your realtor give you suggestions for a few different mortgage brokers. A broker can give you the 3 or 4 loan products that your bank or your credit union have, plus about 20 other ones with different investors willing to take on different people.
Creative financing, right? You just got to be able to think outside the box and find the right people who can assist you in thinking outside the box.
And most of it takes time. It's like fixing your credit score. If you do it all on your own through Zillow, and then you call the mortgage broker after you found your dream home, and I only have a month to move all your money around, that's why the biggest rule I'm trying to break is call someone early. And then you go through every single creative option, not to mention you see what happens with the changes in the market. Suddenly there might be a major dip. And I told everybody before the first Fed cut last year, that's going to be your window before the cut, not after. And rates went from 7 to 6.1% a couple weeks before the Fed cut the interest rate for the first time. And then after, rates went back up. Now, the people who've been working for 6 months, that was a big difference for them, almost a full point difference. But if you weren't working with someone, talking to someone, and God knows you're not going to get that from a bank, a guy who's doing 9 to 5, who didn't hustle for your for your patronage, So it's bottom line is mortgage brokers offer everything the banks can, except fantastic customer service, and they have to kick booty for you. Otherwise, their business doesn't grow.
Yeah, it's an entrepreneur working for and with an entrepreneur, right?
Exactly.
It takes one to know one, and it's great to work with one who can work with another, right? And I think that's something clearly that you put on blast in your business, and kind of shifting it back to your business a little bit. I'm curious. You built a network of first-time home buying agents out there. What is and we don't have to do a huge dive on this, but with the NAR, the lawsuit that went through, the ruling, whatever it is that went through, how did that affect? I know it seemed to me, and I'm not fully educated on it, but it seemed to me that there is maybe more of an effect on buying agents, and maybe has a deeper effect with first-time home buyers than those who are established or second, third plus time home buying. Are there details that pertain to first-time homebuyers that they should be aware of, especially if they've read a news headline that, hey, something happened in the real estate industry and it's big and it affects first-time homebuyers? What should they be thinking?
All the news headlines are wrong. Everything about it is wrong. 1,000,000%.
It's not shocking.
Yeah. And I've got some facts that are going to freak you out. I'll go real quick. I did 2 45-minute episodes on this, but here's all it is. The seller who sells the home traditionally pays the buyer's agent. All they did was they removed that from being part of the MLS so that the realtors couldn't tell how much they were going to make when they went to go help you buy a home. And then they made sure the sellers understood they had the option to decide to pay for it or not, which, by the way, they've always had the option to do. And so as of this month, it started August 17th, August 19th. There's been zero, I think it was a 100% difference in the commissions being offered to buyers agents. So the buyers are not having to pony up more than they did in the past, according to the statistics. The only thing it changes, you have to sign a contract before you can go in a home. You can't just call somebody and say, let's go see a home. Now, the truth behind the whole lawsuit, big real estate's dumb. That's why I started this business. They're dumb. They treat people bad, and especially first-time home buyers. They had the stupid system set up. A bunch of lawyers figured out how to beat it. The reason the case was in Missouri is because Missouri, I don't know why, St. Louis is the king of class action lawsuits in the United States. So they brought it in St. Louis, not because they're supposed to bring it because the people of St. Louis were wronged, completely wrong. The guy who brought, so then they won the case. The lawyers made like almost $200 million. The individuals in the class action suit, last I checked them, they get $28 each individual. It has nothing to do with fixing a corrupt system. It was to make the lawyers $200 million. The main plaintiff who brought the lawsuit is this dude named Josh, and I forget his last name because honestly, I did a whole episode about how much I despise this dude. He brought this lawsuit for the good of the consumer because real estate agents were colluding. A week after the lawsuit closed, he opened a buyer's agent online service to give people a la carte. So you could pay $75 to open a door, $350 to write a contract. In other words, he created this whole lawsuit to create all these headlines about how the agent commissions were bad so that he could have an online company that would serve people a la carte so you didn't have to hire somebody for the whole thing and do a commission. So that's pretty much all you need to know about the lawsuit.
Wow. Okay. Interesting. There's a deep dive into coming. So, and as a first-time home buyer, it's like, are they going to expect to have to pay buying agents out of pocket now? There's nothing still, they need to worry about there?
The sellers are, for the most part, still paying it, but it's exactly the same. It just has a different place that they write it in the contract. It's exactly the same, except that, and I shouldn't say exactly, it's not exactly the same. Some sellers are now refusing to pay, but that happened before the lawsuit. Some sellers were doing for sale by owner. Some sellers were only offering 1% to the buyer's agent, and some buyer's agents were saying, fine, we'll do it for 1%. In 18 states before this lawsuit, you had to sign that contract with your buyer's agent in order to see a home. So it's nothing new, and it doesn't affect first-time home buyers. The simple thing is just, without me sounding, like I'm standing on my pedestal going, this guy, it's true. It was a shakedown, and it's just more pronounced right now that who you pick matters, but who you picked mattered before the lawsuit because there were 3 million homes and only 1 million real estate agents. 47% of agents didn't sell a home last year. So it mattered before the lawsuit that you pick someone who knew how to negotiate the process. And then there's the one crazy caveat about this. When you buy a home, it's one seller selling one home one time. There could be 10 homes you like, and then you narrow it down to one, and that seller could be bonkers. And they don't care what they do with you. They don't care if you give them a 5-star review. They don't care if you complain to the manager about them. They're selling their one house one way, and that's the way they're doing it, period. They might be giving your buyer's agent 5 cents. They might be over list price by $50,000. But that's the game of that you have to recognize as a consumer, which is all the more reason why taking 10 times longer to research and pick the right team, we could spot the red flags ahead of time. And trust me, sometimes I have to work with a crazy seller because my buyers really want that house. And, we do what we got to do.
Right. That's right. Wow. Okay, man, this has been fantastic. I know I want to make sure we respect your time here and start bringing the boat into dock here.
Yeah.
We mentioned the podcast. I want to mention your podcast again, but I want to make sure anybody who's out there listening, if you want to get a hold of David, what's the best way to get in touch with you, learn more about you, and check out your podcast?
Okay, for your entrepreneurs out there, something I learned. GoDaddy has a URL auction, and I've heard it only works like 10% of the time, but somebody sold me howtobuyahome.com for like $2,000 when I first started this, and I can't believe they did it. So I am not a sponsorship from GoDaddy, but if you are trying to get a URL, it was $99. It took 3 months and I got it. And now I get to say, oh, everything you want's at howtobuyahome.com.
There you go. That's
not
easy.
.net, not anything else, .com.
.com, the classic. None of that .crazy anything.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Well, David, this has been awesome, man. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your knowledge with us. I'm excited. I think we could have gone another 2 hours here talking about real estate, but such a cool story about your business and how you went out and you're helping an underserved market. And I'm sure our listeners gained a whole lot of valuable knowledge from you. So thank you again.
Thank you. And thank you for the work you're doing, because I feel kindred spirits here. Entrepreneurs need to, everything I learned about running my business was listening to podcasts. So I appreciate the work that you're doing too.
Thank you. Thank you. Always. All right, David, you have yourself a great time. We'll catch you later.
Thanks.